Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see y'all. Hopefully everyone's digested lunch. I'm a little more awake. I've had quite a few coffees, so I'm ready to be here. We're here to talk about how Backstage helped us tame our organizational and system complexity after a really intense growth period at our company, SpotOn. So the story goes, we had just gone through a really intense growth period of growth by acquisition. So it was really exciting because all of a sudden there were all these new people and new processes and new technologies, and it was a really dynamic time in the company. And at the same time, especially if you were on the ops team, it was extremely stressful because there was new people and new processes and new technologies, and we all had to act like one company. And for a while, we sort of affectionately called ourselves 3 startups in a trench coat, because that's kind of how it would feel. You go to one application, and they would have a totally different stack and deployment process and practice than a company, or part of the company somewhere else. What is SpotOn? We're a mobile payment technology and management systems company for restaurants and small businesses. We build the stuff that lets you run your back end so you can focus on doing what you like to do. Because of this growth period, we had 1,200 repositories, and we had a lot of questions. Which ones were actively maintained? Which ones were essential for production? Who knows? Or kind of almost worse, someone knew, and it was the one person who had been with one part of the company for 10 years, and hopefully they were always happy and never sick, or their kids were never sick, and they never took a vacation and never got another job, because that was sort of our system of record. Because of that situation, our ops team was in firefighting mode quite a bit more than usual, and we had a single team member working on the long-term fix, and that is what brought us to Backstage. By the way, I'm Mike. I'm a staff engineer at SpotOn.
And I'm Eli. I'm an engineering manager at SpotOn. So we're going to give you the spoiler of how it's gone in our company with Backstage. We stand before you after a very successful adoption. The most important things that Backstage has given us are, number one, clarity. We now know what we own in a software perspective. We have a catalog of about 875 different components. And the most important thing is that it gave us focus. It allowed our ops team to stay out of firefighting mode, and we were able to create a platform engineering organization with about 30 people working on really cool scalability problems. So today, what we're going to give you is the talk that we wish we would have heard when we started working with Backstage. So we're going to walk you from day one, what are the core principles of a good Backstage adoption, and then take you all the way to day 2, which is when you take Backstage and you really scale up the value and make it a cornerstone of your organization.
Awesome. Let's get rolling. Let me start my timer here, too. So if you're at the beginning, or you're 6 months in the beginning, it's hard. It's harder than it looks. You are right there in my automatically generated maze. These days, installing Backstage, pretty simple, and you get a lot of great things out of the box. You get great documentation. You get a great active community. We're all here at BackstageCon. You get an absolute pile of great plugins that will just do things for you that you don't have to write yourself, which is really great when you are starting at the beginning. It's great to have help from the open source community. But everything else can feel a little bit trickier, because no matter how much Backstage can provide out of the box, it's on you, or hopefully a team of yous, to figure out how to organize and prioritize what's next. Do you start curating your ideal list of plugins? Do you start writing your own custom plugins? Do you create a bunch of cool skins and themes to get developers to come in and play with it? Do you author your own custom dark mode? We found very quickly that Randall Munroe, creator of the XKCD comic, kind of nailed it a couple years ago when he made this very famous one, that catalog quality is your focus on day one. Backstage can do a whole lot. The processes and tools you can build on top of it can do a whole lot, but it doesn't mean anything if you have an empty catalog. So your core objectives on day one are adding high-quality items to the catalog, kind of trickier, keeping them high quality over time, and being really efficient with how you go about this, because chances are you're pretty strapped for time and strapped for head count and focus time. So let's talk about adding high-quality items to our catalog. Even if you're in a position where you can write some sort of mega ingestion script and parse and cobble together sources from a couple different places, we'd argue that using software templates is a really sound investment of your time. And here's why. They're universally accessible. We found when we were sort of onboarding our first catalog items that the people most predisposed to document, or the people who had the most contextual information, weren't always software developers. They weren't always people who wanted to fire up a CLI or fire up a CI job. They are product managers, project managers, UI professionals, people who had stuff in their head, and they were sort of nominally willing to get it out of their heads into Backstage, provided it was easy. And you get that ease of use with the software templates for free. They give you a nice web form, and people can plug it right in. Just as valuable is they kind of create a forcing function for your platform team. High quality is a really easy phrase to throw around at a conference, but your team has to decide what that means. Like, let me give you a few examples. From the docs on components in Backstage, there's 3 well-known types: services, websites, libraries. Is that enough for your organization? Do you want more? Do you want less? You got to have those conversations to know what quality means wherever you're at, and having a YAML template that people can argue about in a pull request or talk about is a great way of having those conversations. Going even further, if you have a service type and you're choosing to support that, do you want to ask developers to create an API document? One of the great things about Backstage, it has first-class support for an API, whether it's gRPC or OpenAPI, but someone has to plug that URL in. If you don't inform your developers or whatever teams are onboarding that they need to do that, they're not going to know to go read that spec. So your software templates can guide them through that process. At SpotOn, we have 2 really workhorse templates for this, and it's not going to surprise people what they are. There's document the existing thing. When you start with a pile of 1,200 I don't knows, you have to start somewhere and just add catalog infos quickly. As you get rolling, though, you'll have a create a new repository thing that hopefully is a great place for you to incorporate your best practices. Which this leads really nicely into our second sort of thing of be efficient with the tooling you build. This could really be its own talk, so I'm just going to try to give an example here of where it can go right and wrong. So returning to our earlier example of documenting your existing workflow is a pretty simple step. It's whatever the golden path standard is for catalog info, plug that in, someone clicks the button, you're good to go. You want to reuse that logic when you create a new thing, and that can have a few more steps. Your platform team might have standards on creating catalog info documentation. Your operations team probably has standards and preferences on how you deploy things to your Kubernetes clusters. Maybe your security, your InfoSec team has scanning policies they want you to add at different points in your CI pipeline or once it's deployed. Maybe you have a really passionate, we call them streamline teams here, the people who build the products our customers use. They have ways they want you to build your Go code bases or your Python code bases, and they want to write a template. We found for us, decomposing our broader software templates into composable sub-templates really let people do a few things well. They let us independently version and publish the standards. Like at different points in your adoption journey, you might be iterating really fast on what a good catalog info template means, and you want to be able to move fast without impacting several other software templates. They can be maintained by subject matter experts, so when you find that streamlined team that's like, hey, we've got the perfect way of organizing your TypeScript code base, we've solved it for the whole company, how can we get this out there? They can just manage their own template. They don't have to worry about Kubernetes or Backstage or security scanning and the other really essential pieces of their application, but pieces that maybe they don't want to care about. And lastly, keeping things as sub-templates reduces our barrier to contribution kind of for those same reasons. When people have something they care about, we actually have a template in Backstage, a software template that helps them write sub-templates and publish them into Backstage. So it's really just templates all the way down. Working this way and not having to redo the standards as we found more ways of getting our golden pass out to developers let us keep focusing on building catalog quality. Keeping things high quality over time is just as important, right? Your standard, you're going to change as things go on. This will probably be more obvious to people here. CI, great. If you're in GitHub Actions or whatever, writing a CI action to sit in developers' repositories and watch the catalog info, maybe it runs on a cron script or on changes, it'll let people know as your standards evolve that they need to update their catalog info files. Developers, kind of home base is their code repos that they're in. I would not expect that they're checking Backstage constantly or checking an email list or checking a Slack channel. This lets it kind of stay where they live and keep up with your standards. This is an example here of someone attempting to delete their domain information and it's just letting us know in the pipeline, please don't do that. GUI validation, same thing. When it's universally accessible, more people use this. Thankfully for us, especially at SpotOn, there are some great open source plugins in the Backstage community that give you this for free. We've got a resources slide here at the end, so we'll just shout them out. The Plugity entity validation, which you're seeing a screenshot of right here, lets people just copy-paste very quickly their catalog info files into a UI, click a button, see what's wrong. Simple, easy, they can iterate quickly, they stay out of your support channel and doing productive work. Similarly, the plugin catalog unprocessed entities plugin, it's a mouthful when you're not reading it in GitHub. Sometimes developers will iterate and iterate and iterate, and they really want to document things, but it's just not going right. And this plugin here provides a great dashboard you can keep right in your instance of why something's not entering the catalog. And hopefully developers will start caring about that very soon, because probably everywhere we notice that our scale-up teams are really busy. There's always more people competing for their time than they have time to give. There will always be teams that have a hard time prioritizing documentation, prioritizing the catalog. And when your objective is quality, this can kind of be a hurdle for you. So once you give them great ways of putting things in the catalog, great ways of having them stay high quality, our solution is to just archive repositories that don't meet the standard. Just not nuke it, because it's easy to reverse, but let our developers know with a little more insistence that there's something they need to take care of before they can handle that feature flag or that bug fix they want to do. And this comes with a lot of help and guardrails. So what happens with developers is we'll modify the README at the top and said, so sorry, please help us out. Click this link to learn more how you can help us keep things documented. That takes us to our doc site that answers questions as, why is this happening to me? And I need an exception. And what else is on here? Is this safe? Is this a good idea? I need an exception. The doc page will kind of let them know, no, please just read the docs here and fill out this web form, returning all the way to the beginning, our first software template. Our catalog info template will unarchive the repository, file pull requests with the information, and they're back up and running. This runs about once a week. It's not so onerous that they can't iterate and experiment, but it's something they'll run into every week. So once you have the sort of just quick recap, to build on a good foundation for your Backstage adoption, quality, quality, quality. Adding high quality things, keeping them high quality, and keeping the workload low for your teams. Once you have that in place, you can start to do some great things that I'm going to hand off to Eli to talk about.
Thanks, Mike. Let's talk about the journey and putting everything together to actually get Backstage to be a really valuable asset for your organization. Hopefully something that can be essential. We're going to share with you some more stories about how we got to the point where Backstage was accepted and what it took to get there. In our journey, there's two important lessons that we learned that I want to share with you today. First one is, be willing to get your hands dirty to get things done. And the second one is, think of Backstage as that tree that you can plant once and then yields many fruits. So let's start by getting dirty. Getting your hands dirty in this context means doing the work that's not glamorous, but sometimes necessary for success. It's the work that's undesirable. It's the work that maybe if you're trying to look into Backstage or like platform engineering, you're trying to avoid, and that is the good old manual work. None of us like it, but we have learned that even when you build some great tooling for developers, you might still need to be able to put in some blood and sweats and elbow grease to get things done. Here's how we learned this. This is a graph of the number of undocumented repositories at SpotOn over time. Our goal from day one was to get this line down to the bottom, to 0. So we want to have every single item in our GitHub repos documented in the catalog. As you can see in this initial graph, there is obviously the flat line of implementation, and there's an initial push of people getting stuff documented, so we make some progress. And this is where the tooling and the first communication push and people being very excited about a new tool and new promises of everything gonna be great starts working. But eventually you see that kind of plateauing and settling in. And that's the part where actually many people who we talk to that try to adopt Backstage end up giving up because they can't push past that plateau. That happens to multiple factors. You know, developers are busy, like Mike said. It also reflects the fact that it's really easy to document the repos that are actively being developed, but a lot of the repos that remain in this plateau are the ones that no one has touched in like forever, or the people who worked on that like left the company 10 years ago, and everyone's scared to like take a look at it. So after a couple months of this, we were starting to thinking about giving up and like what's gonna happen. So we sort of had a catalyst event at organizational level that helped us push through. We had a big reorg. We talked about our company sort of like behaving like really 3 or 4 companies actually inside one. So leadership at some point said, you know what, enough is enough, we gotta fix this. So we reorganized around different business domains, and we decided that everything was going to resolve to a domain. People work for a domain, and then software belongs to a domain. So we got a mission as the Backstage teams. Like, the mission is every single repository in SpotOn has to be documented in the catalog, and you have to have a domain assigned to it, so we know like who's responsible for it. And this is when we thought, great, we nailed it, we have it. We've built all this great tooling, we have all of the templates, the self-service, and now we have what we needed, executive sponsorship. We have the big stick from the CTO saying that if you don't do this, you're gonna be in trouble. So now, of course, we expected developers to just line up, document the repos, and everyone lives happily ever after. What ended up happening looked a little bit more like this. Bunch of people watching and one person doing all of the work. So it turns out that even that was still too hard for a lot of our teams to go in and document, so we figured, what is the easiest possible way that we can get people to at least give us this domain information? So we created a spreadsheet, and we put every repo in there and told people, like, please, could you just like find the repo that you have and just put like the name of the domain, nothing else. We ask nothing else from you. Just do that. And we used git blame to figure out who to talk to and went to back channels and found a way to somehow get this completed. And then once we had it, we had to script creation of the catalog info files and push pull requests to 600 plus repos. Not fun. Do not recommend that process to any of you. I think we almost caused an outage one time because somehow merging a catalog info file triggered a production deployment, and not a great story. But the truth is that sometimes this is the work that's necessary. And I like to highlight this because, especially if you get hired to a company in the post-startup stage that they might have identified, like, hey, we need a platform team, so they go and hire a platform guy, and you come in from maybe a big company that has a platform culture, just know that you might have to face stuff like this, and this is what it looks like sometimes to succeed. You know, this is not the type of work that we thought would make it to the stage of Backstage Con, but it's just what it took to get things done. So we wanted you to know the reality of the situation. So here's what the graph looked like after that sort of big manual push, just like a big cliff, like down, and like we did it, like we accomplished our mission, and that's great. Like, this is cool, but we think the real flex is actually here. Yes, we got everything documented and we did it one time, but we really told ourselves, like, let's make sure we never have to do this again. And that's where platform engineering really helped. That's where the archival process of repos that get undocumented helps. That's where the self-service helps. Like, we can get this done, and like, we haven't looked at the catalog in a long time in terms of keeping compliance because things just work. So manual work might get you there, but just know that at the end of the day, platform engineering is what lets you sustain that success. And this is really the dance of, we think, a platform work. You have to go between when do you put your foot down and say, no, let's do this the right way, and when do you sometimes concede and say, you know what, we gotta get this done one way or the other. Let's just get our hands dirty. Next thing we want to share is we really love Backstage, and once you get your platform in and you kind of do the hard work and you plant this tree and the tree grows, it yields many fruits. And this is why we're being so happy with Backstage, because we've been able to use that really high quality catalog to solve a bunch of problems at the company. So we just wanted to pick a couple of ideas, things that we've done, and show you how Backstage has been really an important part of our sort of cultural transformation. Once we had ownership data in the catalog, where we were able to say, hey, we know every single repository that we own, and we also know like to what person it belongs to in the form of a domain, we thought to ourselves, why don't we take this data and push it to the rest of our infrastructure? So we started by doing it with AWS Cloud. We really wanted to have tags in AWS that reflected the domain ownership information. So how do we do it? We have an infrastructure monorepo at SpotOn, so everything gets configured in there via Terraform. We have individual configuration files per service. And what we did is updated our deployment pipeline for the infrastructure to go back and check Backstage and said, hey, I'm deploying service X. Do you know its domain? And then if you do, we go ahead and deploy the service, and we actually, at deploy time, are able to dynamically inject that tag and get the domain information there live. Really cool stuff, very helpful, and again, we can get this not by asking developers to have to modify their Terraform file or do anything in the code, but actually just dynamically and transparently with Backstage. We then thought, hey, why don't we do the same now, but we do it in our Kubernetes clusters, and we label our pods and our deployments and our services and our objects with the same information. We actually first started thinking about doing it the same way we had done it for the infrastructure. Can we do it at deploy time? The difference is that the way that we do Helm deployments at SpotOn is actually not a monorepo, but a polyrepo. So every single individual service repository has its own CI/CD pipeline definition. So in order to make that work, we would have had to open pull requests across 600 repositories, modifying a pipeline definition, and we said, there's no way we're doing that again. So instead, we said, let's think about a new solution. What if we do it at runtime? So we ended up implementing a really cool feature of a custom label controller. A controller in Kubernetes is a service that basically keeps an eye on all of your resources and enforces some sort of desired state that you want on it. So when you delete a Kubernetes pod and it comes back again, that's a controller working. So we're able to create our own controller that enforces that everything that gets created also has the domain label and metadata that we wanted to enforce. So this is what sort of our big observability solution looked like for SpotOn. This is one of the reasons I personally really like Backstage, because it's so versatile. Backstage is a portal, and it has UI, but it doesn't have to be front and center in order to be valuable for your organization. At SpotOn, I think the most value we got from Backstage is actually as a sort of supporting actor, being the source of truth of metadata, and then we get to push that in out to many other places and then use those features in a great way. So once we're able to push all this ownership information to the rest of our platform and our infrastructure, here are some of the things we've been able to get. We now have alert routing. In the past, if we had a pod crashing, or we had a database that was running out of disk space, or we had a software version that was hitting end of life, no one would know. It would have to rely on someone in the ops team somehow noticing, and then we had to do software archaeology to hunt that person who owns that and see if they can resolve it. Nowadays, we just have automated alert routing. We know who that resource belongs to, and we're able to send it to the correct owner so they can take care of it. We also have pretty good cost reporting, so we can tell you with a good degree of accuracy how much your service, your domain is spending. And as you know, with cost and savings, awareness is the first step, so at least showing people how much you're spending has allowed us to save a lot of money as well. And finally, a cool one that we implemented recently was just-in-time production access. So developers at SpotOn do not have production access as as it should be. But when you're on call and you're holding a pager, you might need that access during an emergency, or even better, to debug something before an emergency happens. So now that we have the proper ownership gates, we're able to safely provide developers that request it if they're on call production access only to the resources that they own, so that we're able to reduce the blast radius of potential mistakes. All of this, again, made possible by Backstage, the domain info that we collected in the catalog, and how we're able to push it to the rest of our infrastructure. Best part about this is that developers see value by just putting their stuff in Backstage once, and then everything else just works from it. So we have developers that even if they have never logged into Backstage beyond just putting a catalog info once, they can still see the value in what we do. This is our main takeaway. If you forget everything we said so far and just remember one thing, is this. Build a really high quality catalog and then use that to solve many problems at different times. Thank you very much.